Good morning and welcome to this inaugural lesson of the Paris School of International Affairs. And to do that, it is my great pleasure to welcome Teresa Ribera. Big applause to her, please. She is Executive Vice President in the European Commission for a clean, just, and competitive transition. Teresa was one of the architects of the Paris Climate Agreement, and this year, as you know, 2025, we celebrate the 10th anniversary of this agreement. Now, she is in a different position, and she has to make sure that one of the political forces behind this agreement, the European Union, is faithful to the commitments that were taken in Paris. And she needs to ensure today that the European Union marries its climate objectives, sustainability, with competitiveness and with security. We wanted to start the academic year here because this may not be a very fashionable topic, but it's certainly one that represents the best hopes, but also the biggest threats to humanity. And since this is a school of international affairs that prides itself on taking by the horn the most difficult, intractable issues, but those that are also the most important to deal with, here is to beginning of an academic year with the topic of climate change, climate transition, and with Teresa Ribera. Teresa is going to give us her views, after which it's to you. There is 2 mics on each side of the aisle. It's to you to put to her the questions that are bugging you, on which you need answers. Okay? Without further ado, Teresa, over to you.
Thank you, Arancha. Thanks to you all. Good morning, everybody. I'm very happy to be here, I could say, once again. After a few years with not meeting the Science Po students and not being in this room. But this is not new to me, and it is not new to me to be aware of your interest and the questions that you may raise later on. But now, I have been invited to this terrific honor to be part, in the very beginning of the academic year, of this conference to discuss on relevant issues that may come up. And I have learned that only 2 days ago, my very admired Professor Stiglitz was in the very same room. So it's a little bit of a challenge to think how I can come to discuss and exchange views on different aspects. But I like the way he framed the road to freedom and the interconnections between economics and a good society. What can I say after that? There may be many things, and of course, many of them may be related back to climate discussions. To what extent climate action, climate economy is also part of geopolitics. It is also part of justice and the rule of law. And then I look around this room and I see you all. I realize, because I have been said, but it is quite obvious too, that you represent more than 110 countries, coming from different geographies, from different backgrounds, different expectations. But all of you being united in the deep interest to understand and influence what it is going on, how you can help to improve the quality of life of people all over the world. How the different challenges that we have already identified as challenges ahead us can count on sound and consistent answers in a very turbulent moment in geopolitics. How we can tackle, how we can ensure the delicate balance between managing global conflicts and building the cooperation we need for lasting peace. How we can count on energy goods, on services, while ensuring long-lasting availability and environmentally sound and healthy planet and ecosystems. What is the relation between peace and prosperity, the fight against inequality, and global governance? The importance of justice and security in a world growing increasingly divided. I propose a reflection on the role of Europe, because I think that Europe has a role to play. I could say, Europe is a need. Europe is a dream. Europe is a permanent and achieved goal, a project where we need to build on. It is not that it represents and copes with all the challenges that we may identify worldwide, but it is a relevant player in order to ensure that we can count on the right answers in the time to come. And you may think, oh, so much Europe. Yes, I think so much Europe is needed. I think Europe is an asset. It is a value. It is a good reason to stand up for. And it is something that we need to fight for. We have spent years speaking about globalization as a means to shape a promising interconnected prosperity, and now we realize that we may need to rebalance global and local in a context of turbulence and uncertainties, wondering whether we are able to build a fair combination between global and local, or whether we head towards chaos, lack of rules, a kind of law of the jungle. And the examples of chaos and challenges to what we have tried to frame in the last 70 years are already quite visible. Rising geopolitical tension challenged the ideals of peace, cooperation, and full respect for the rule of law, human rights, or the UN system. Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine tests Europe's resilience. The genocide in Gaza exposes Europe's failure to act and speak with one voice, even as protests spread across European cities and 14 United Nations Security Council members called for an immediate ceasefire. Global trade dynamics expose deep vulnerabilities in the systems we have long depended upon and require us to rethink and expand our partnerships. The weaponization of trade, economic balance, supply chains, economics in general, technologies, may be used as a way to bend to their advantage in breaching the rule of law and the very principles of multilateralism that we have been crafted in these decades. And all of these things are not just sectoral or individual threats, but also challenges to the fundamental freedoms and rights upon which our societies and the relations among us have been built. So sometimes it is striking to read people saying that there could be a kind of trade-off between democracy and performance. We have maybe forgotten what it means, lack of democracy or human rights. And we know that we do not live in a perfect world, that there is much still to be done. But we should pay attention not to risk what it has been achieved, even if we need to improve it. This is why I think that staying silent in the face of injustice, lowering our standards, to accommodate whoever should not be an option. Accepting independence, compromising values, compromising the future should not be something to accept. Playing constructively and in a committed manner in the international arena is key to address these questions, and I count on you. But at the very same time, we need to work internally. As Europeans, you have come to one of the most relevant institutions of research and exchange of thoughts, shaking our minds on how political science and commitment can help into this exercise. And in that context, in the heart of Europe, I think that it is worthy to remind us that deepening into our domestic action and capacities is also a way to improve and strengthen the quality and the capacity, the skills of Europe to play worldwide in a consistent manner. It has been over a year since Draghi and Letta, the former predecessor of Arancha, reframed Europe's focus on competitiveness and resilience. These reports reminded us that Europe's future hinges on embracing the green transition, pushing deeper unity, and making bold investments to ensure the future. The message was clear: we Europeans can do much more on our own initiative by deepening our single market, working more closely as a union, and building in our collective strengths, so to be sure that we can be coherent when developing the international policies. The Commission's new mandate focuses on Europe building opportunities and competitiveness on the basis of a clean industrial revolution, providing security and ensuring our values. And over the last months, we have been working towards this vision in a very conflictual context. We have achieved lots of things, and we still need to work much more. One clear example is our single market. It sounds old. We've been talking about the single market since the very creation of the European communities. It sounds useless, or it's frustration. It does not work sufficiently well. Let me tell you, it is still our best asset and a very important thing to work on, not at whatever cost, not in whatever manner, but keeping the delicate balance between market, social commitment, and capacity to organize the ecosystem through regulation. The current geopolitical landscape clearly demands a scale and a unified economic strategy if we want to create wealth, reduce inequalities, and build opportunities. And allow me to share with you that, in fact, the creation of wealth is also a question of security. People, anyone, wants to have the opportunities to have a better life for themselves, for their children. It has to be fair. It has to avoid spoiling the resources or compromising the future. But we need to think how we can ensure that these opportunities may be built. So instead of retreating into 27 separate national approaches, we need to focus on building a stronger, more integrated, and fairer Europe. So this is the building of Europe I was talking about. And still, our biggest weakness in achieving the full potential of the single market remains disunity in its different angles, either if we talk about finance, energy, economic security, standards, whatever. But an improved chance to a prosperous Europe depends on completing these frameworks and acting decisively. That was Letta and Draghi. There are areas where we have made some progress, even though there is still work to be done, as I said, even if we talk beyond this domestic context in the single market, and we come back to climate. We're in Paris, about to celebrate, as Didier was saying, the 10th anniversary of the Paris Agreement. Let's talk about climate action. There is something that happened at the beginning of the summertime that is very important, very important. And it lasted half an hour in the front pages of the main media all over the world. The International Court of Justice confirmed something which is crucial. The Paris Agreement's goal to limit global warming to 1.5 is not just a political target. It means states need to do their best. Every country, even those not officially part of the agreement, must work to prevent climate harm. This opinion carries a strong legal and political weight and shows that Europe, even if we have work, we still need to do a lot. And that is part of the role that Europe should be playing, facilitating, bridging, ensuring good partnerships around climate action, not only among the 27 member states, but also working with the rest of the world. Our emissions have decreased by 37% since 1990, and our proposal to cut emissions by 90% by 2040 compared to 1990 levels represents a major milestone. We have come up with a proposal as European Commission, but now we need to secure the Council support to give industry the long-term certainty required to invest. And there are concerns or questions being raised, or even doubts on whether climate action is compatible with competitiveness, when in fact it is the other way around. What we cannot think of is providing goods and services, spoiling the resources, preparing a climate chaos, not understanding that we need to combine the two goals, because the alternative is a non-option, a non-alternative. It could not mean prosperity because it could not last. It could not mean competitiveness because it could be based on a fake reality. But this drives us into a different context that has an impact also in international relations. It is not ethics, it is not moral, it is not only climate, it is new geopolitics. It is the transition times from the old oil and fossil fuel geopolitics to a new geopolitics based on a much more ecological economic reality. It is a market driver, it is an innovation driver, it is also a very complicated way to restructure the way we produce, the way we relate to each other, the way we ensure trade and skills. Reducing emissions is the very first step forward to reduce the resilience challenge. We need to continue working to embed climate security into our policies, not as an abstract goal, as I say, but as a very concrete response to floods, droughts, heat waves. We are struggling with these things today, and it will be increasingly worse and worse in the time to come. So climate action is also security. Climate action is hope. Climate action is something we cannot forget. We cannot say we wait for a better time. On the contrary, now we are experiencing not to have been quick enough up to now. It is not that we have done nothing. That's not truth. We have done lots of things. The problem is that we still need to do much more. So we need to count on a new climate adaptation law, backed by dedicated financing in the next European budgets. It must be our common answer to these increasingly urgent realities, and this is what we are proposing and will fight for in the coming months. We have also taken significant steps to break free from fossil fuel dependence, investing in affordable clean power for all, electrifying our energy systems, building them differently, thinking them differently. It is a great challenge too. We do it because we believe it makes sense in the climate terms, as I said, but not only. It makes sense in business terms. In today's global landscape, countries still relying heavily on foreign fossil fuels are vulnerable to political and economic pressures beyond their control. And those relying on national fossil fuels do not do better either. They miss the race for innovation and smart use of resources. They miss the opportunity to build prosperity without compromising environment security. In 2023, the European Union alone imported over 400 billion euros worth of fossil fuels. This is an amount that we did not invest in education, health, research, defense, critical infrastructure, affordable houses development, and so on and so on. Burn capital. In contrast, since 1990, as I said, we have improved our figures and reduced these dependencies. Modern grids, interconnections, storage are key to succeed and to make sure clean and affordable energy reaching every single household. Betting on a new generation of industrial solutions, ensuring a lower of far dependency from abroad. At the very same time, we know that we need to make sure that all our efforts create opportunities for everyone. Such a deep transformation in such a short period of time cannot be achieved if it is not supported by everybody, if it is not handled in a fair manner, if it does not come along with social policies that pay attention and anticipate where there may be an unfair situation that deserves the attention of the institutions, not to be made against losers, to provide good opportunities for some winners. On the contrary, we need to think on the social impact in terms of pricing. We need to think on the risk of enhanced poverty in certain households. We need to think on the skills that may be required by the labor market. We need to think on what it means in the different approach in the use of land. These are all good reasons why I say there is a need for Europe, because it could be easier if we manage to facilitate at the continental size the response that we need to build. It will require heavy investments. The European Union and its member states can go a long way in footing the bill. The European Investment Bank can and will step in. We are a wealthy continent. How do we use our savings? How we decide on investments? How we assess the risk, the cost, the worth, the value? We can do better, much better. We need to think on the public side of this accountability, so the multi-annual financial framework. But we also may create opportunities to ensure that we mobilize private capital of what we could call the patient investors, those that bet into the mid and long run. We can think on how a banking union, a savings and investments union may lower the cost of capital. We should think on how we can play with these needs and these assessments to partner with other people in other geographies. We need to think where the complementaries may be in terms of how we develop partnerships with other colleagues. In fact, one of my asks to you is please do not accept anyone saying that the green transition is a burden. It is not. What it is a heavy burden is not to be ready to accept that whatever it may happen, we will be unprepared. It is a challenge, that's true. It has difficulties, risk. We need to pay attention to too many things at the very same time. But the real burden, the real cost, could be to forget that it is something that we need to face, to afford, to do. And it is better to do it in the smartest possible way. The European Union would not be what it is if we do not look beyond our borders, especially in these times when others close their own borders. Yesterday, right before I took the train to come to Paris, the College of Commissioners adopted the legal framework for the partnership agreement with Mercosur, more than 20 years of negotiations. And I know that there are concerns being expressed by farmers for a very long time, and we need to address those concerns. But we cannot take more than 20 years to agree on how, based on the rule of law, we can build prosperity between two continents that share values, that bet on democracy, law and human rights. Whatever difficulty we may find, it is always better to be honest, identify, shape the difficulty, and try to solve this difficulty than hiding the difficulties on renouncing to our principles, standards, and values. It was also the day when we backed the modernization of the strategic partnership with Mexico. Think of Mexico. Think this very integrated market in the North America region. Canada, the United States, and Mexico. Think about the 40 million Mexicans living in the States. Think about what it means when you have counted on such a great partner to build such a very important and strategic relation, and suddenly you find yourself with no clue on how to proceed. So we should think not against anyone, but how we may be able to stand up and to identify the way forward without renouncing to our own principles and values. And again, this will be challenging. But please stand up. Do not say we renounce, this is useless. Just try to identify how we can overcome those difficulties by standing up and by identifying the way to improve the answer to the challenges. So I could say, in this rhetorics of chaos, the diplomacy of friendship, tough, firm, coherent, grounded on values, but friendship should win. That is the dream of Europe I referred to in the beginning. These arguments go beyond trade. They contain elements for economic security, climate change, access to raw materials, global governance. My sense is that this is going to be a hard time. But again, we should be thinking whether we support chaos, each one on his or on her own, or we try to build and modernize the tools, the instruments that were conceived in a previous context, but were conceived to facilitate these answers. As I leave here, after a short stopover in Brussels, I will head to Ethiopia, to Addis Ababa, for the Africa Climate Summit. Again, what do I say to the African ministers dealing with climate? That we have no time for climate action right now? That the UN system does not deliver anymore? That we don't trust the institutions in Europe? That we don't care about the rest of the world? That we think that the rule of law is old-fashioned? That our market is fragmented and closed only for Europeans? No, of course not. I'm not going to do that. That's not what I think. That's not what I'm accountable for, but that's not what we have learned to appreciate as Europeans since we started to shape the response to the very big challenge on how to build prosperity and peace after the World War II. So, energy, climate, biodiversity, trade, peace, security, governance, there are many things to talk about when we talk about Europe, when we talk about climate, when we will be identifying along the whole academic year what are the challenges that are more relevant for you, how you can contribute to provide some insights, some relevant thoughts to address the challenges and their answers. And we will be very, very happy to count on you and your answers. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Teresa, for this tour de force, and thank you for building around this conversation on climate, the many different dimensions that it has. It's to you now, 2 mics on each side of the aisle and a mic upstairs at the balcony. You please go to the mic, you tell us briefly who you are, and you put your question. That's the name of the game. I see someone that is queuing up there. Over to you.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
You have to shout a little bit so that we
Okay.
can hear you. The sound does not seem to be very good today.
Yeah, that should be okay, right?
That's okay.
Good morning. Thanks for taking the time and coming to speak with us this morning. Now, I don't want my question to be mischaracterized as one with an accusative tone, but rather as one that comes from a genuine perspective of curiosity and a desire to understand better. This is my question. Now, what would you respond to those who claim that the European Union has, for the longest time, shown grave double standards in its foreign policy stance of Israel and Russia, especially considering that the crisis in Gaza sees civilians suffering undefended from the actions of Israel's state, without a military protecting them? Do you refute the claims of these people?
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the question. I think that I can say 3 things. The first of them is that this is the real test for us, not only for the Europeans, but in general terms, for the world, and to what extent we are able to stand up and to break this, how to say, horrible situation that we are witnessing, and that shows to what extent we missed the adequate measures to stop it. The second thing is that, yes, the European Union has a relevant role to play here, and this has been part of the discussion both in the Council and in the Commission for a while already. We have been we have dedicated a great amount of resources to Gaza and Palestinian people for a very long time. It's still the case. There are many member states doing or taking measures on their own, and it is very frustrating to see that we still have difficulties to come up in a united manner. And I am among those feeling this frustration. And the third thing is that even if it is very slow. We see some movements, and we should manage to keep on working, not to accept frustration, but to keep on fighting for the ceasefire, for the liberation of hostages, for the protection of civilians and the media, and for the recovery of what it should be normal life for the people, including the recognition of what the UN Charter forces on the human rights, forces and the humanitarian law and the war law force us to recognize them.
Thank you. Let me move to the lady over there.
Thank you. Can you hear me well? Yes.
You have to shout a little bit.
Yes. So thank you for being here first. So we all know, obviously, the need to invest in the clean transition, and the Draghi report has highlighted how much we need to invest, how massive it needs to be. However, the European Commission has signed a deal with President Trump in July, a deal to purchase more and more energy products and to invest in the US. So I guess my question is, how is that compatible with the EU's ambitious climate goals?
Thank you so much. Well, this is quite an important issue that you raised for two things which are relevant. Oh my God, this Israel-US climate, I don't know what it is.
No.
Something has happened in the room. So, what I would say is that, as I told you, we have been building the world as we know it today for decades with very close relationships with the United States. On the premises of the respect of the rule of law, cooperation in innovation in technology, multilateral system being developed on the basis of human rights and global governance and the UN system, security all over the world, including security in Europe, and suddenly we find ourselves with something that we did not expect, which is that our partner challenges everything. So the response is, let's try to build on our own, and this is why the domestic agenda and the strengths are important, including lowering any type of dependence, thinking in energy terms or industrial terms, and supply chains, so this rebalance between global and local. But at the very same time, try to avoid escalation in a conflict that could impact everywhere, because building such a deep relation for such a long time means that there are lots of interdependencies that are not easy to handle from one day to the next one if we come to be alone. So if you take it as it is, you take the papers, you read it, I don't think you will find any single European in the whole continent saying, oh, such a great thing. At the very same time, the try is to say, okay, let's try to be sure that we do not escalate, and let's try not to forget that we need to bet on our own capacities and on the development of our own capacities, including, by the way, this energy systemic change. And yes, it is quite a contradiction to say we are going to bet on competitiveness, and at the very same time we need to rely on something that we do not produce and can be used by others to be more competitive than ourselves. First thing, it doesn't make sense. This is why we bet on green energy, electrification, and this is why it is pointed out as a big shake in geopolitical terms. Economics relying on oil and fossil fuels, economies that bet on a different industrial and energy base. At the very same time, there is a reflection there that could be important, at least in the transition time. It does not only cover fossil fuels, it also covers nuclear goods, on something that may be important in the transition times, but the Commission does not handle public procurement to buy energy goods. It depends on the company. So there may be a role to be played by the institutions, the regulators, the administrations, to facilitate a channel to ensure trade-offs in terms of goods. The main lesson, the quicker we get rid of fossil fuels, the better for our economy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lady over there.
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah?
Go. You talk and then the mic will function.
All right, thank you very much for addressing us today. I have a question regarding the upcoming move to phase out Russian gas by the European Union by 2027. So together with the, I'd say, common suspects such as Slovakia, Hungary, and Austria, Spain has emerged as somewhat a surprising, critical, and reluctant voice in this move. And as someone very familiar with the domestic political scene in Spain, I would like to sort of inquire about your thoughts on this Spanish relationship with Russian gas and this sort of reluctance to get fully on board with this initiative. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I don't think that is the way I would describe it. I think that in the case of most of the European member states, not all, and very much in particular in the case of Spain, the government does not count on public companies that buy, sell, trade on any energy good, including LNG. The structure of the gas consumption in Spain is mainly based on LNG plus some natural gas being transported from Algeria, and it is very diversified. So the question is not whether there is a blockade on LNG or natural gas, oil and natural gas coming from Russia. But first, what is the legal basis to do it, so to avoid being liable by the private companies, because you are breaking an existing contract. So the fact is that, and that was me, by the way, I sent letters to the Spanish companies saying, do not enter into a new contract, and sending letters to the European Commission saying, take a common measure so that it is forbidden for any company, but as a sanction, so to ensure that there could not be an issue of liability. Why? Because we don't want to find ourselves in a take it or pay it contract, so to be forced to pay to the Russians with no gas. And the only way to get that, and that's what we have tried to do in these months with the Commission, within the Commission, is to ensure that this goes down, it is legally sound, and that those imports that are based on pre-existing contracts can go down in such a way that do not create liabilities. But I think that I don't think that Spain would have any type of problem on this. There may be other countries that have a little bit more difficulties on this. You have pointed some of them. And I think that now what we have got is a sound basis to phase down the imports of any goods, energy goods coming from Russia.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So let me go to the balcony again. No? Yes.
Hello, my name is Paul. My question is, you mentioned entering into US energy contracts because of the UN Charter. I was wondering, in a hypothetical scenario where the UN Charter collapsed, would those energy contracts be rethought? Or what is your thought on the matter?
Say that again. Is the energy charter that the relationship?
The energy contracts in the US being rethought because of the UN Charter collapse, hypothetically?
Because of the UN Charter collapse?
Yeah, or a restructuring of the UN Charter.
Okay, so let me just rephrase so that we see if we understand the question. You want to know whether the European Union would reconsider its purchases of energy from the US should the US take a hostile stance vis-à-vis the UN Charter. Is that correct?
Yes, thank
Good.
you.
All right.
That's the type of question which is very interesting to come from this room. I mean, I think that it is not something that has been decided to do so. You are opening questions that may be interesting, and that is part of the broader negotiation, and it is fair to raise the question as you did. So if I am saying that the relationship with the United States and the conversations dealing with trade go beyond trade, you may be saying, okay, then you may connect other things. That's what you are saying, if I understand it right, and you connect it back to the UN Charter, is that?
Somewhat, yes.
So that may be an avenue to explore. It is not what we have right now. What we have right now in front of us is how we shape in the best possible and clear manner the scope of what it is under discussion with the United States instead of opening everything.
Thank you.
Over there.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for the speech. My question was, given the need for a most rapid and efficient transition when it comes to energy, how are we to balance the utility of global suppliers and global technology with the need not to become dependent again upon in crucial sectors upon foreign countries like China?
Well, I think that this is a very interesting question too, and this relates back to the whole approach on the global supply chains and the investments and innovations taking place in many different geographies, which is very good. In fact, probably the world that we knew 40 years ago is not anymore the world that works today. And every society wants to be richer, wealthier, has the capacity, the intelligence to do lots of things. And then there have been different avenues in the last decades. And I think that there have been very successful outcomes coming from different countries, including China, connected to these technologies. And this shows to what extent this discussion between competitiveness and clean does not force us to decide. On the contrary, we may be more competitive if we use resources in a much smarter manner, if we are more efficient, and if we bet on clean. There may be other questions to be raised on other type of performance in China, but I think that it is quite fair to do so. Then we enter into a different discussion, which I think is very relevant too. If we do not depend anymore, or if we want to avoid dependence on fossil fuels, but we need to develop a new economy, we may identify new raw materials, critical raw materials, rare earths, that could be needed for this economy. Do we know where they are? Do we know who owns those materials? Do we have a proper, balanced and fair relation with those owning these materials? Do we enter into a kind of transactional relationship or a more balanced relationship to ensure that prosperity is shared and not just for ones or the others? That could be perceived this way in this continent. At the very same time, we identify that those that identified the clean economy as a very relevant market force at the global markets, at the global scale, did also work on the identification of this map, where these resources may be, who may own these resources. So what we witness right now is this situation where there may be 1, 2 countries counting on the rights to use these rare earths and raw materials in a very large share all over the world. So controlling these markets. How we are going to face this? How we are going to ensure that the way we afford the challenge is sound, consistent, and effective? How we are going to open relationships or to build relationships or to strengthen relationships with those that own these goods and they count on these goods still in a free context and not being bound by other previous legal contracts. This is why I think that the list of challenges is huge. So we should avoid being stopped at the very beginning, denying the reality that we need to go through those challenges, but trying to identify where the challenges are and how we can best strategize on the best response for the challenges. But yes, critical raw materials, rare earths, are key in the new economy and do enter into this geopolitical game or economic security also for us when we think in creation of wealth, modernizing our economy, betting on the competitiveness of our industries and providing opportunities for the young generations. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Over there, if you could identify yourselves, please.
Yeah. Hello, my name is Esther. Thank you for being here today. So my question is regarding the Paris Climate Agreement. So as our Dean has mentioned, it's the 10-year anniversary of the Paris Climate Agreement. And back then it was seen as a huge success and a very optimistic outlook. But this year we have seen the Trump administration withdrawing from this agreement. So my question is, how relevant is the Paris Climate Agreement today without the US being part of it?
I loved your question, Esther. First question on the Paris Agreement. That's good. Now, I think that I honestly think that it is very important, and there is this sense of not being understood how important it is that we bet on the next cycle of 10 years once we meet in Belém in November. This is not the first time that the United States withdraws. Bush did play against the Kyoto Protocol. Trump, first mandate, bet on the withdrawal of the Paris Agreement, and now it comes again. In the previous occasions, there was this temptation being spread all around the world, so other countries thinking on following the US example. It has not been the case right now. On the contrary, people think that we need to stick and that it is important to keep on doing, and people, the different societies are experiencing the impacts of climate change, and there is this strong understanding coming from the business community that this is the new big reference in terms of economic performance and market requirements and so on. So I think that the context is there. That doesn't mean that we are in good shape or it is good, what we see in the horizon, in the landscape. I think that we have achieved lots of things in these 10 years. We are far away from being in a position to ensure the 1.5, but we need to refrain ourselves from saying, so we are cooked, nothing can be done. On the contrary, I think that we need to be smart on how we keep on doing. There are several appointments in the time to come to see how we can proceed. It is not good news that what we see in some of these moves coming from the United States and the federal administration. I mean, the withdrawal of the Paris Agreement is not good news, that's for sure, but it is worse when we identify the concrete decisions that they have been taking. For instance, to go against any type of regulation that could provide some transparency on how the investments are being made and to what extent green finance represents a better assessment of risk and a better assessment of eventual cost. Now, it is considered to be discriminatory, so to ensure that there could be some finance being channeled back to coal. I don't know if it will happen or not, but that's bad news, because that prevents transparency and brings the investors back to darkness. So makes our life more difficult in terms of how we invest, how we take the decisions on investment. It is very cruel what the United States has done with US aid and solidarity all over the world. And it may backfire, because if you cannot count on a minimum standard that requires solidarity all over the world for primary health devices or support or childcare or food security, and we may do a lot as Europeans, but it would be very difficult to cover the whole loophole that the Americans may believe in. It may backfire because there would be many people all over the world that could be thinking, well, if they don't care about us, why we are going to care about them? So I think that this type of questions in a world that it is deeply interconnected are important. And yes, it may have also an impact in terms of to whom we recognize political leadership and to whom we do not recognize because they are not there when they help us. So I think that there are lots of connected things that we need to pay attention to that could turn back to the discussion on climate. And this is why I think it is so important that the European Union, maybe in a difficult context, much more difficult than we expected, than what we expected, upholds its commitment. We were in Beijing in July, I think it was in July, and this was a very clear point of common assessment. China being one of the majors, if not the major already, emitter of the world, being impacted by the climate impacts, willing to be a relevant player in the international arena, going through this industrial revolution, and thinking that there are many shared values around climate action with the values and policies that the European Union has been building for a very long while. So let's try to express that there may be lots of things where we do not agree, but we agree that this deserves our political and economic attention and our efforts in the world context. And I think that we need to rebuild all that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Balcony up there.
Good morning. My name is Levente. Thank you so much for coming to talk to us today. And my question would be about the Commission's stance on nuclear energy, especially concerning the US energy deal that has been discussed a lot. I'm really curious about what incentives the Commission is planning to put in place in the long term for the nuclear energy industry to be boosted in Europe, and what the details of the energy part of the trade deal might be concerning nuclear industry. President von der Leyen has mentioned that nuclear technology as well as fuel can be purchased from that quota, but it doesn't seem to be very sure. What does the Commission right now think, or what do you see as a potential energy deal and the role of nuclear in it?
Thank you so much for your question. As you know, that is part of what each member state can decide, how they build their electricity system, their power system, how they bet on how to support the the clean technologies, so to develop the next breakthroughs. What it is tried to achieve through the European regulation and the European programs is to ensure that we can support through the research funds the common projects of interest between different member states, programs that could update and accelerate the breakthroughs, the technology breakthroughs. That's the part that we support, and we support in different fields, including through IPCCs being fully dedicated to the new generation of nuclear devices and technologies. In the US-EU deal, the only reference that is being made is under the chapter dealing with this general figure on the expected amount of money being in these trade flows dealing with energy goods and energy devices. And the other thing that I could say, which is part of the European Commission considerations, is on the domestic policy. There is this big bet on how we can build and accelerate the infrastructure that could be required in order to count on a much more electrified energy systems all across Europe in a way that is fully consistent with the different complementarities. And this infrastructure may be slightly different. It is not all interconnections between the different member states. It's also thinking on what type of storage could be needed in terms of backing and ensuring an efficient use of renewable energy, or being combined with a secure system that connects renewable energy solutions with nuclear in those countries betting on nuclear. So I think that this infrastructure planning is relevant from that perspective. And finally, the other thing is how to avoid or how to ensure that there is a level playing field in terms of a well-functioning electricity market. So to what extent, if there is this demand to be able to support through public subsidies the new generation of nuclear, as it could be in the case of renewable energy infrastructure or the grids as such, how we can ensure that there is not any type of lack of competition on one side, so it is, these guys fully stop, or it is open to compete among different players, or to what extent there is not an overcompensation that could erode the basis of a level playing field in the market. In the case of the nuclear plants, normally there is no competition. So it cannot be tackled as providing guidance upfront. It doesn't mean that if a member state wants to back, for whatever reasons, the new developments, they can ask for an okay in terms of using public money. But it goes through an individual process as it has always been. Obviously, there is an experience that backs what the DG competition knows and assess, but it is different than when we speak about general alternatives where there may be lots of competitors getting or trying to get the same position, and then the market decides and ensures. I may say that that's what it is supposed to happen in a competitive bid, that there is no overcompensation because the different competitors could be paying attention to offer their best price.
Thank you. Gentleman over there.
Buenos días. Thank you so much for being here with us this morning. My name is Yago, and my question is related to the need for a stronger Europe at a global stage with regards to EU's own domestic policy. So over the past couple year or so, there's been reports that key policies such as the Digital Markets Act in the digital realm, or on the sustainability side, CS3D, CSRD, has been heavily challenged and maybe also influenced by foreign actors such as the US. And I mean, there's been reports that these were parts of the trade negotiations. So the question, maybe first of all, is your reaction to those developments, to those reports, and also how do we ensure that the EU can stand united let's say, as a common front at a global stage, and so that national interests are not played against each other, so that we are bullied, in a sense, in our own domestic policy? Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. So I guess you count on two different questions. One of them is what about the digital in the global context, and what about us being united around digital. So on the first thing, well, I think that the positions have been very clear. Our regulation sovereignty is not under discussion, and we would not accept any type of claim or pressure to change our regulation as part of any trade deal. I mean, I said at the very beginning that maybe we need to understand the context of what it has been signed in the broader context of this partnership being built for decades, and how we handle things in such a way that we avoid conflict. But at the very same time, we need to be very clear that we are not going to regulate or to decide not to apply a law because anyone says that they don't like our rules. The second thing is, and this applies very much in particular on the digital, and I had the honor to be the first commissioner in charge of the Digital Markets Act at the end of the first cycle of compliance, and there have been 2 sanctions already being decided and states of objections being deferred to those players in the digital markets context that are not complying with the obligations that are in the Digital Markets Act. The second thing is that, in fact, the main message is, hey, we are ruling to protect our consumers and to ensure the level playing field in our market. And let's remember, it is still our best asset, as I said. We can improve it, but it is our best asset, our market. And the digital market is a very relevant part of our single market. But the question is that anyone can be in our market. We are an open economy. But of course, everybody is bound by the very same laws if they want to operate in our market, independently on where the headquarters of that company may be. They may be in Virginia, or they may be in Beijing. But they are bound by the same laws than those companies being headquartered in Berlin. So I think that this is a very important aspect that we need to underline once and again. Then another very interesting question. In fact, the Digital Markets Act and the Digital Service Act started to be designed during Trump's one administration in a close exchange of views on how to respond to the new challenges being posed by these very big new key players in our markets to be more effective. Traditionally, and it is still the case, we were implementing the antitrust laws. This means that we need to identify, we need to prove, we need to go through a procedure that, of course, covers all the rights of defense and the building of those evidence that can allow any law enforcer to take a decision, a very long time. And at the end, we take the decision of non-compliance that can be challenged in a court, or may come once the digital context has changed, has evolved, it is not relevant anymore, but in the meantime has favored in such a clear manner a behavior that it is anti-competitive, that the competitors do not exist anymore. So what we started to say is, well, it may be good to come up and to say upfront, if you want to enter into this market, these are your obligations, these are your rights. We are much more effective, much more efficient, much cheaper, both in terms of administrative cost, but also in terms of whatever litigation or defense cost may have the one that didn't know that it had to comply. but also economic costs for the rest of the operators in the market that do not suffer the harm, because the big player knows how to behave. And, of course, the antitrust people in the United States say, oh, it's interesting, go ahead, let's see. And in the meantime, we have been learning from each other, from the experience of each other, and at the technical level, the change of information is quite fluent. So I think that it is important to explain why it is not against anyone, but against anti-competitive behaviors in a very relevant economic field that impacts, of course, the economic, industrial, business profits or cost, but even worse, and this comes back mainly to the Digital Service Act, we are learning that it also favors different understandings and cultural evolutions in terms of preference for any consumer. But we need to know, to learn, and to ensure that we protect citizens to avoid this to happen. And the very same behaviors that we do not allow in the traditional way to relate each other, in the paper analogical world, should not be allowed either in the digital world. So how we learn to do that is what we are trying to improve. And I think that for your last comment, yes, I think that there is a very, very, very relevant consensus at the European landscape, both governments and citizens, so to ensure that we count on the full application, full implementation of our laws.
So what I heard, I don't know what you heard, but what I heard is that, and this is important because Teresa is also responsible for competition policy in the EU. What I heard, I mean, just so that we're clear, and if I didn't hear properly, you tell us. What I heard is that the Commission will not trade digital standards in Europe for some other objectives with anyone, whether it's country A or country B or country C, so that we are also not being targeting anyone.
So you heard very well.
I did heard. Okay, good. That was good. That was important to clarify. Lady over there.
Oh, hello. Thank you for all that you've shared today. My name is Ieda, and many academics and activists around the world have been concerned that the transition, particularly in Europe, is being carried out by companies, whether in the extractive or the energy sector, that are being associated with many human rights abuses, especially in global south countries, such as land grabbing or exploitation of traditional territories. So my question is, in your perspective, what are the priorities right now, particularly for the European Commission, to raise business standards and ensure that the green transition does not come associated with more environmental and human rights costs?
Thank you so much. I think that a great effort was made so to adopt a package of regulations to ensure that transparency dealing with finance and decisions to invest was clear beyond a certain threshold of turnover in companies, and that included both type of standards and references, so reference being connected to environmental components and human rights and social elements, including the providers and supply chain of those that were subject to this regulation. The thing was that it took a very long time. It came from the recommendations coming from a specific board to support this green finance approach. And we came up with these 3 regulations after a very complicated process of negotiation, because at the European Union scale, as you are probably aware, it is the Commission plus the Council plus the Parliament. So there were some redundancies, some things that did not match very well, some things that there may be contradictory, and these elements were claimed to make it very difficult to be applied. And we enter into a simplification process to ensure that this could work better. I could say, anyone can be against simplification if we achieve the same goals. We should not hide things behind the aim to simplify. So I think that we need to count on sound basis to learn, to take into consideration these references, including being transparent on how we use our money and how the corporates use their money. It is a learning process, that's for sure, but we should avoid turning back to darkness. As I said, it is already happening by undoing certain regulations in other geographies.
Thank you. Balcony, please.
Thank you so much. My name is Fabian. I just had the question about, since the US came up a lot today and we're talking about problematics about dependencies on so-called great powers, China with trade, Russia with energy, United States with defense, but you also brought up something like Mercosur. So I'm interested in to what extent things like Mercosur, more regional agreements with medium-sized states, especially in the so-called global south, and with the federations of these states, such as the European Union is also a federation of medium-sized states. How can that be the future of the European Union in world cooperation, maybe, as opposed to historic cooperations with so-called great powers like the United States? Thank you.
No, thanks for your question. I don't remember the exact figure, but something that is very important is to remind that probably the United States is involved in around, 15% of the global trade? This means that all those other players that are not the United States are around 85% of the global trade. So I refer back to my comment. I don't think that we Europeans should play against the United States. Of course not. Happy to work with the United States. They have been our partner for a very long time. But if you don't want to be next to us, we will be working with the rest of the world. And that is what many others in the rest of the world have also identified. So, yes, I may have a preferential agreement of trade with the United States, but the United States doesn't seem to be interested in this agreement. So, Europeans, we may try to identify where we have an opportunity to build trade relations with you. And that's exactly what we are doing. And I think that it went Japan, it went Canada, it went Mexico, it went Mercosur. We are doing with India. And there may be many others. And it makes sense. I think that it is good. Of course, we need to ensure that we build these relations in a good, balanced manner, and we pay attention to the concerns and expectations coming from other partners. But of course, you have a huge market with a pretty demanding society that is able to recognize and pay well. So I think that we need to use this in such a way that we bet on the good and not on the evil in terms of how we build relations with others.
Thank you. We have 10 minutes left. So I'm going to group questions. So both sides, if you could just put your question to Teresa so that we get as many questions as possible.
Okay, I'll leave the intro. My name is Marius. I wanted to hop now back to the COP process. So you mentioned the 90% goal put forward by the European Commission. How certain are you that this goal will pass, that it will fly with the member states? Because there's still a lot of disagreement, also in view with the upcoming Danish informal council. And what is the role of the Commission now in pushing forward the 90%? And how does the Commission engage also with other actors such as UNFCCC, UNCBD, UNDP in putting forward sound policies and in pushing forward the agenda? Thank you.
Thank you. And your question, please.
Okay, so thanks for being here. My name is Adenike, and I work at a marine NGO, so my question's from me, but also my colleagues at Seas at Risk. And that question is, what chances do you see for the Green Deal and all of the related biodiversity files in particular, when it seems like this commission is a bit focused on security, competitiveness, and what kind of starts to feel like deregulation?
Okay. So we have to manage a council. Not only Environment Council, but then there are people that think, well, this goes beyond environmental concerns, this is competitiveness, this is political, this is trade, how we can open this conversation in the European Leaders' Council. And I think that it's a little bit in the middle. It's good to count on a clear target, it is good to have this orientation on how we can ensure that we can build the different pieces of a puzzle that is increasingly challenging, but it is increasingly also paying back in good ways for the citizens and for the industries. So I think that the Commission, for the time being, has done its work. We came up with a proposal. Formally, we need to wait and see and to be present in the discussions of the Council. At the very same time, it is also clear that there is this needs to count on political explanation and capacity to argue in favor of what we have proposed, so to ensure that there is a sufficient understanding coming not only from the Council but also from the societies pushing their governments that are the ones representing them in the Council. And we know that there have been many elections in different member states where we have heard lots about climate, not climate, action, not action, delay, and so on. So, of course, one of the things, and I turn back to the NGO's comment, is how we can be sure that that playing with our tools, with the society, with the democracy, with the institutions, we are sure that we are able to deliver in a context where there has been this huge attempt to identify climate as something, using something coming from, a word coming from the other side of the Atlantic, something woke, something ideological. Hey, this is not ideological, this is facts, observations. It is also modeling and trying to identify how it may evolve, and we are lucky to count on the capacities to understand how it may evolve, but this is not something that we are inventing, so it's better to be prepared and resilient. So it doesn't make sense to lose time, to waste time discussing this. Short word, I sum up. The Commission has formally ended its work till the very end of the process, so not to veto whatever it comes from the Council or the trialogue with the Parliament whenever there may be things that need to go through the Parliament. But in the meantime, I think that it is important to use our voices as representatives of the European interest to come up, to defend, to explain why it matters, and to ask for the support to the other institutions, which is a little bit a very similar approach to your question. I think that I tried to refer it in my speech, initial speech, when the candidate Ursula von der Leyen came to the European Parliament to say, these are my political guidelines, she stressed competitiveness, security, and values. And I honestly don't see any way to match competitiveness, security, and values if we do not take into consideration the physics, the biodiversity, the ecosystems, the climate security. It could be to be blind when assessing what security means, and we've got terrible examples. It could mean to be blind on what is competitiveness based on, because green is a market driver, it's a technology driver, it is an innovation driver. It could mean being blind against the values of our citizens and next generations, how to create prosperity, how to be secure, how to reduce inequalities, how to ensure health. So I think that it is very much present everywhere, even if, I come back to the question, there have been political statements against the green agenda or against the climate action. But I think that it is just cherry picking what you want to concentrate your efforts and what you would prefer not to exist. But the fact is that it exists. You are not going to cheat nature or climate because you don't like what it is happening. So I think that this is very important to be repeated once and again, because being aware, developing awareness, standing up is key. And I think that the role that the NGOs have demonstrated to be playing for a very long time with the deep engagement on the ground is a common value for all of us. And sometimes people tend to forget, but I think that it is quite important that you stick. So thanks for your work and the work of your colleagues, and keep on doing and going, please.
Thank you. Let me take the last three questions. And sorry that I have to be a bit merciless, but the room is going to be used after that. So I'll start with the balcony, one on each side. If you're short and sweet, then we get Teresa to address the three questions.
Good morning. Thanks for your time, first of all. My name is Francesca, and I had a question mainly regarding biofuels. It has been a few years now since the EU has set investing on biofuels, such as, for example, bioethanol, as one of its top priorities regarding climate action and green transition. And as of today, the EU has accomplished to gradually increase its local production of feedstocks to be designed for this purpose, not only to be exported, but also to be used locally within the EU in order to reduce its dependency on third feedstock producers. At the same time, like it has been addressed many times today, the new energy deal with the US might cause not only the problematic relations of dependency, but also an oversupply of fossil fuels within the EU, and consequently a drastic reduction in investments of this kind. So my question was, has the EU already foreseen the possibility of drafting a policy plan in order to boost or at least maintain the production and usage of biofuels the way that it is right now, given this new setting? Thank you.
Thank you. Question here.
Hi. Dear Vice President Ribera and Dean González, thank you for being today with us. My question concerns European security. I would like to ask what you think should be the European approach, if the EU is doing enough to support Ukraine, and if the EU could do more to prevail justice in this very illegal war of Russia. And I can also relate this to the green transition we've been talking today, as we've seen a number of environmental disasters Russia has committed in Ukraine and continues to commit, and what should be done in this approach. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least.
Yes, and thank you very much in the name of all Science for Students, but I think especially from the Spanish ones that we're here. So we wanted to ask, first of all, on the viability of certain projects that Spain has relating to energy, such as, for example, MidCat, or even building the capabilities for being an hydrogen exporter. And also another question relating to water scarcity. I'm from Catalonia. We had 2 years ago water scarcity. What is the government of Spain doing right now to solve this situation, and how can this also be transferred towards other European challenges regarding the management of water supply? Thank you very much.
Wow. So thanks a lot for all the questions, and thanks a lot, and apologies for those that I could not take as questions. I will try to be very short on biofuels and how to boost and maintain, and what is the balance when we trade, when we try to assess environmental and forest and use of land good standards and the provision, the supply of biofuels. I have to say, very honestly, that I'm not sure of being fully updated. So what I would underline is the fact that, yes, we need to combine and to bet on a wide range of options, so to be sure that we handle things in such a way that we do not cut the opportunity to get the next breakthrough technologies, including biofuels coming from waste and things like that, that we learn that we need to pay attention not to create a negative incentive to provoking deforestation, and that we need to be responsible on how we handle the soil and the use of the land. Then in addition, there are all these other aspects related to how we create or ensure the demand, so to ensure that it makes sense to invest on how we provide and produce these goods. But I have to confess that I'm not fully aware on where we are right now, but I promise I will find out and tell Arancha back to give you the right answer. But I wanted to make these general comments on this. Then on Ukraine, I think that Ukraine means a lot. Ukraine means a lot for many things. I think that it is very impressive how Ukraine not only has been able to stand up, defend, and remain united with all the small things that we may think about, but remain united for such a long time in such a difficult context. It is very, very, very impressive. First comment. Second comment, it means that in fact there is this threat. I mean, first, of course, this is human horror, but there is this threat from a country in a context where we thought that the peace dividend would prevent anyone to open a new war, and there has been no problem to open a new war. They did not get what they want, which was to get Ukraine in 2 weeks, but the war is still there. For us Europeans, we know that this is relevant for not only for borders, for values, for the UN Charter, sovereignty, for peace, and that we need to stand up with Ukraine and we need to support. And we have been supporting through different means, including the work to facilitate the accession of to the European Union, but of course providing the goods and the financial support all this time. And the question is that we see this hope to have a near future end, but at the very same time we are quite cautious because we don't trust very much what we see. First comment. Second comment, we think that it is very important to say once and again that what it cannot be done is to impose a kind of peace that first could be unfair, second could be tried to be expressed without taking into consideration and respecting the willingness of the Ukrainian sovereign institutions, third could not last. So, of course, it is not possible to think about a peace and long-lasting guarantees of peace without the full involvement and the full recognition of the conditions of Ukraine. And this is not simple, but the Europeans are behind. Then I come into Catalonia, water and hydrogen to say two things. First, I'm not allowed to comment on national politics. So I will not comment on these concrete things, but I would like to make two comments. First of them is, yes, water scarcity or flooding, different parameters in terms of the availability of water is very sadly the reality that we are going to face. And we may be facing a scarcity, flooding, so excess or lack of with an increased frequency, and we need to prepare the scenarios not for an average amount of available water, but to be ready for the extremes. And this means investment in infrastructures, in good use, in avoiding leakage, in quality, and in proper management, so the education and skills of the population. Even worse, because yes, Catalonia is used to have this type of events. Now it is unhappily increasingly frequent and increasingly tough but there is a collective memory that these things happen. But it may happen in the Danube. It may happen in Hamburg. It may happen in Brussels. I was watering down my plants on March. In March, I was going down to water my plants in Brussels. I could not believe it. And I think that this is a real challenge we need to be prepared of. This is why I think that building resilience is very, very important. On infrastructures and hydrogen, what we have learned is that it takes a lot of time to have the capacity, the ability to prepare the infrastructures. The infrastructures are costly, but are required. And what another lesson we learned from the Ukrainian invasion and the blackmail on the energy goods is that you never know what may be the problem and where it may be placed. But the more interconnected and the more prepared we are, the more solutions we can count on in case it is needed. And hydrogen may not solve all the problems of the world, that's for sure, but it will probably be part of the solution. So we need to be prepared for the hydrogen economy in a continent that is willing to be sufficiently robust and autonomous, not to rely on others providing fossil fuels. So I think that betting and building interconnections in this field is also important. It is important the involvement of the European approach and not just consumers paying for that, because we have said that this needs to be viable also for consumers. So I think that these are the type of things that we are trying to respond at the European scale right now. Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you. You will have the opportunity to ask the questions about Catalonia to the President of Catalonia, who will be here next week. So get your questions ready for that. I want to thank Teresa, and I want to leave all of us with one message you have given us. One that, in my view, can be very helpful as you go to classes now, which is the challenges of coherence. Coherence between what you say and what you do. Coherence between the global and the local. Coherence between your values and your interests. And coherence in the manner in which you stand to different conflicts around the world. So with these words of coherence, thank you again, Teresa. We will want to